Imagine a lone child, barely old enough to fend for himself, lost in a perilous wilderness teeming with predators. The unforgiving savanna stretches endlessly before him, shadows stretching long as night falls. The only sounds are the guttural growls of prowling lions and the distant, mournful trumpets of elephants. Every moment teeters on the edge of life and death. What would you do if your only hope of survival lay in instincts you didn't know you possessed? The story of 8-year-old Tinotenda Pudu begins with a sudden disappearance, one that sent shockwaves through the tranquil rural communities near Zimbabwe's Matasadona National Park. It was a day like any other when Tinotenda wandered into the park, but the quiet normalcy shattered as night descended, and there was no sign of the boy. His absence grew heavier with each passing hour, transforming from concern to mounting dread. The search began with hope, but it quickly became a desperate race against time. The dense, sprawling wilderness of Matasadona, home to some of Africa's deadliest predators, was no place for a child. The park's vastness, dotted with thorny acacia trees and dense underbrush, created a nearly impenetrable labyrinth. Villagers and family members searched tirelessly, their voices growing hoarse as they called his name into the deafening silence of the night. Each step into the wilderness brought with it an overwhelming sense of foreboding. The predators of the park, majestic but merciless, prowled the same terrain where the boy was feared to be lost. The thought of Tinotenda, tiny and vulnerable, surrounded by such danger, was almost too much to bear. By the second day, the search evolved into a desperate battle against time. The villagers, armed only with the knowledge passed down from generations, scoured the wilderness. They knew that the odds of survival in such a harsh environment dwindled with every passing hour. The park's wildlife, while beautiful, posed an omnipresent threat. Lions roamed the open plains, their powerful presence a constant reminder of the danger lurking in every shadow. Despite the odds, Tinotenda's story would not end in despair. As the search stretched into days, whispers of his resilience began to emerge. How had he survived even a single night in such peril? How could an 8-year-old boy face the dangers of the wild while adults armed with experience and tools feared to tread too far? These questions underscored his story of survival, a tale of insurmountable odds, sheer willpower, and perhaps even a touch of the miraculous. For Tinotenda's family and community, his disappearance became a test of faith and endurance. It wasn't just about finding a missing boy, it was a fight against the relentless and unforgiving force of nature itself. Tinotenda Pudu was an 8-year-old boy with a quiet, endearing presence. He lived in a small village on the outskirts of Zimbabwe's Matasadona National Park, a community where life was simple but steeped in tradition. Tinotenda, or Tino as his family affectionately called him, was the youngest of 3 siblings. His days were spent playing with his cousins, helping his mother with small chores, and chasing dreams only a child could envision. The Pudu family lived modestly, relying on subsistence farming and occasional trading for sustenance. Their home, a humble thatched hut surrounded by the sprawling African wilderness, was a testament to resilience and resourcefulness. Despite their limited means, the family was tightly knit, bound by unshakable love and shared struggles. On the day of his disappearance, Tinotenda had followed his cousins to a nearby field to herd goats, an activity that blended responsibility with childlike curiosity. But somewhere along the way, he wandered off, perhaps distracted by the allure of the dense wilderness just beyond the village boundaries. When Tino failed to return home that evening, his family's initial concern quickly morphed into panic. His mother, Anna Pudu, was inconsolable, her cries piercing the silence of the village night. His father, a stoic man who rarely displayed emotion, rallied neighbors and friends to search for his boy. The tight-knit community, bound by mutual reliance and compassion, sprang into action. As torches lit the inky darkness, voices called out Tinotenda's name into the vast expanse of wilderness. The village elder prayed aloud, pleading for his safe return. The night stretched long, heavy with fear and uncertainty. By dawn, the realization had set in. Tino wasn't just lost. He was alone in one of the most dangerous terrains in the world. Matasedona National Park is a stunning yet merciless wilderness. Stretching over 1,400 square kilometers, it lies on the shores of Lake Kariba and is renowned for its breathtaking scenery and teeming wildlife. It is a place where nature reigns supreme, and the delicate balance of life and death plays out daily. The park's terrain is as varied as it is perilous. Sprawling savannas give way to dense mopane forests, while rocky outcrops rise like sentinels above the landscape. The grasses, golden and swaying under the sun, often conceal predators stalking their prey. The park is home to an impressive array of wildlife, including some of Africa's most iconic and dangerous animals. Lions, majestic yet lethal, are the apex predators here. Their roars, which echo through the park at night, are a reminder of their presence. Elephants roam in large herds, their immense size both awe-inspiring and intimidating. Hyenas, often underestimated, are cunning scavengers capable of taking down prey when the opportunity arises. The waterways teem with crocodiles and hippos, while the skies are patrolled by eagles and vultures. For a seasoned adult, traversing this land requires skill, preparation, and a healthy dose of respect for its dangers. For an 8-year-old boy, the odds of survival seemed almost impossible. Adding to the peril was the extreme weather. Days in Matasedona are marked by scorching heat, where temperatures can soar to unbearable levels. The sun is relentless, baking the ground and sapping moisture from the unprepared. Nights, however, bring a sharp contrast, with temperatures dropping to lows. This harsh dichotomy challenges even the hardiest of travelers. The vegetation posed another threat. While the dense forests provided cover, they also concealed dangers. Thorns could tear at clothing and skin, while venomous snakes lurked underfoot. The fruits growing wild in the park, though tempting, were not always safe to eat. The combination of these elements created a nearly insurmountable test of endurance and instinct. The villagers knew the risks well. Matasedona's wilderness was unforgiving, claiming even experienced park rangers who ventured too far unprepared. The predators in the park rarely hesitated when opportunity presented itself, and Tino Tenda, a small and vulnerable boy, was easy prey. Yet, the danger wasn't solely from the wildlife. Dehydration, exposure, and exhaustion were as lethal as any predator. Without a consistent water source or shelter, survival in this environment was a race against time. The searchers, many of whom had lived their entire lives on the fringes of this wilderness, understood that every passing hour diminished Tino's chances. The heat of the day would sap his strength, and the cold of the night would test his resolve. The drums they beat daily were not just a signal to guide him back, they were a desperate cry of hope, a plea for his survival. For Tino Tenda, the park became a crucible, testing his resilience in ways no child should endure. Yet, this very wilderness that threatened his existence also became a source of his survival. The rocky outcrops that loomed ominously in the distance provided shelter, and the scattered wild fruits became his sustenance. The instincts he didn't know he possessed began to surface, guiding him through each perilous moment. As the community rallied, the park stood as both an adversary and a silent witness to the remarkable story unfolding within its borders. Tino Tenda's disappearance wasn't just a tragedy. It was the beginning of a tale that would defy expectations and leave an indelible mark on all who heard it. It was an ordinary afternoon in the small Zimbabwean village on the edge of Matasedona National Park, a day that began like countless others. The air was heavy with the earthy scent of dry savanna, and the rhythmic bleating of goats echoed through the nearby fields. Tino Tenda, an energetic 8-year-old with a penchant for curiosity, had joined his cousins on what should have been a routine task, herding the family's goats back to safety before dusk. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the grasslands, the children laughed and chased each other, their playful shouts carried by the warm breeze. Tino Tenda lingered behind the group, his attention caught by something in the distance, a bird perched on a tree or perhaps a cluster of wildflowers swaying gently. No one noticed when he wandered off. When the sun dipped below the horizon and Tino Tenda's silhouette was nowhere to be found, the whispers of fear began to grow. The other children, now herding the goats toward the village, called out for him, their voices hesitant at first and then frantic. "Tino!" they yelled into the encroaching darkness, their calls swallowed by the vast expanse of wilderness. By the time they returned home without him, the unease had transformed into panic. Tino Tenda's mother, Anna, was the first to realize something was terribly wrong. She ran from one neighbor's hut to the next, pleading for help as tears streamed down her face. Her cries pierced the stillness of the night, summoning villagers from their evening meals. The family's worst fears began to take shape. Tino Tenda wasn't merely playing a game or hiding nearby, he was gone. Within hours of Tino Tenda's disappearance, the community mobilized. Villagers armed with torches, drums, and machetes fanned out into the wilderness, calling his name as they scoured the dense underbrush. The rhythmic pounding of drums echoed through the darkness, a desperate beacon meant to guide him back. The searchers moved in tightly packed groups, their steps cautious and deliberate. Every rustle in the bushes, every distant sound of movement sent waves of hope and dread through the crowd. The wilderness was alive with its own symphony, the distant roar of lions, the guttural calls of hyenas, and the shrill cries of nocturnal birds. Each sound was a reminder of the dangers lurking just beyond their torchlight. The first night was brutal. The darkness was absolute, the terrain treacherous. Thorny bushes tore at their clothes and skin, and the oppressive heat of the day gave way to a biting chill. As the hours dragged on, exhaustion began to take its toll. By dawn, there was no sign of Tino Tenda. His trail had vanished into the labyrinth of grass and trees, leaving the villagers with little to follow but their instincts and prayers. The search intensified as the sun rose. Groups of men ventured farther into the park, retracing their steps and scanning the ground for footprints or broken branches. Women and children remained closer to the village, preparing food and water for the search parties while keeping an anxious vigil. Each passing hour weighed heavily on the community. The older villagers, who had lived their entire lives near Matasedona, knew too well the perils of the park. The longer Tino Tenda remained missing, the slimmer his chances of survival became. Despite their best efforts, the searchers faced overwhelming challenges. The terrain was a relentless adversary, with its dense forests, uneven ground, and hidden dangers. The sun beat down mercilessly, sapping their strength and forcing them to rest frequently. Wildlife tracks crisscrossed the area, complicating their efforts to distinguish Tino Tenda's trail from those of predators. The fear of encountering one of the park's many predators loomed over every step. Lions prowled the savannas, their movements silent and deliberate. Elephants, though majestic, were unpredictable and dangerous when startled. Even the hyenas, with their eerie, mocking laughter, seemed to be circling the edges of the search parties, a grim reminder of nature's harsh realities. By the second night, despair had begun to seep into the community. Tino Tenda's parents clung to hope, but their faces betrayed the anguish they were fighting to suppress. Anna refused to rest, her voice hoarse from calling her son's name into the darkness. Tino Tenda's father, though stoic, couldn't hide the tremble in his hands as he held his torch. As the search stretched into its third day, fatigue and doubt began to take their toll. Some villagers whispered that it might be time to accept the unthinkable. But others refused to give up, driven by the faint hope that Tino Tenda was out there, waiting for rescue. The story of Tino Tenda's disappearance spread quickly, reaching nearby villages and even the park rangers stationed on the edge of Matasedona. Offers of help poured in, with experienced trackers and additional searchers joining the effort. Despite the mounting odds, the community's resolve remained unshaken. The wilderness of Matasedona, vast and unyielding, had swallowed Tino Tenda without a trace. But even as the days dragged on, the villagers refused to let the boy's story end in silence. They fought against the park's treacherous landscape and their own fears, determined to bring him home. For Tino Tenda, the first night in the wilderness was nothing short of a nightmare. As darkness cloaked the land, the once familiar world turned into an alien and menacing expanse. He had wandered far beyond the edge of the village, into the untamed heart of Matasedona National Park. The vibrant sounds of the savanna, chirping birds and rustling leaves, gave way to an eerie silence broken only by ominous growls in the distance. Tino Tenda's small frame trembled as he clutched at his arms, trying to shield himself from the biting night air. The laughter he had shared with his cousins that afternoon seemed like a distant memory. The wilderness was alive around him, but it offered no comfort, only threats. His ears tuned into every crack of a branch, every rustle of grass, each sound fueling his growing panic. As the hours crept by, his hunger gnawed at him. He tried to think back to what his grandmother had taught him about survival in the bush. Watch what the animals eat. The land will provide if you know where to look. But in the overwhelming darkness, even these lessons felt like distant whispers. When the guttural growl of a lion echoed through the night, Tino Tenda froze. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, his breath caught in his throat. He instinctively dropped to the ground, making himself as small as possible. The sound grew louder before fading into the distance, but the terror it left in its wake lingered. Morning brought little relief. The rising sun illuminated a landscape both beautiful and merciless, endless savannas with patches of dense forest, the occasional glimmer of water in the distance. Tino Tenda's dry throat ached for relief, and his stomach churned with hunger. With no clear direction, he followed his instincts. He trudged toward a cluster of trees, hoping they might offer shelter or food. Among the undergrowth, he found a bush laden with small, bright red berries. He hesitated, remembering warnings about poisonous plants, but desperation overtook caution. He plucked a handful and tasted one, waiting to see if his body reacted. When nothing happened, he ate a few more, though the sour taste made him grimace. As the hours stretched into days, Tino Tenda's survival instincts began to sharpen. He learned to move quietly, avoiding the open plains where predators might spot him. He sought shelter in the crooks of trees, climbing high to escape danger at night. He discovered a trickle of water in a shallow streambed and drank deeply, the cool liquid soothing his parched throat. But the wilderness was relentless. On the third day, as Tino Tenda rested beneath the shade of an acacia tree, he heard the unmistakable crunch of heavy footsteps nearby. Peering through the tall grass, he saw them, a small pride of lions, their golden coats shimmering in the afternoon light. His heart raced as he pressed himself against the tree trunk, willing himself to be invisible. The lions were close, too close. One of the younger ones sniffed the air, its eyes scanning the area. Tino Tenda's tiny form remained motionless, his breath shallow and silent. After what felt like an eternity, the pride moved on, their powerful bodies disappearing into the grass. Another encounter came when he stumbled upon a herd of elephants at a watering hole. At first, he was mesmerized by their size and grace, their trunks dipping into the water and spraying droplets like liquid diamonds. But his awe quickly turned to terror when a young calf trumpeted in alarm, drawing the attention of the adults. One of the larger elephants, ears flared and trunk raised, began to charge. Tino Tenda bolted, his small legs carrying him as fast as they could. He didn't stop until his lungs burned and his feet ached, finally collapsing behind a cluster of rocks. The sound of the elephant's footsteps faded, but the encounter left him shaken. Despite the dangers, Tino Tenda's will to survive remained unbroken. He relied on every ounce of courage and knowledge he had. He learned to listen to the rhythms of the wilderness, the distant calls of birds signaling nearby water, the rustling of leaves warning him of movement. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tino Tenda climbed a tree to avoid predators for the night. From his perch, he watched the savanna transform under the glow of the moon. The stars above seemed endless, offering a faint comfort in their constancy. By the fifth day, Tino Tenda was a shadow of his former self. His clothes were torn, his skin scratched and sunburned. But his eyes held a fierce determination. He had survived encounters with lions and elephants, navigated treacherous terrain, and faced hunger and thirst that would have broken most adults. The disappearance of Tinotenda shook the close-knit community to its core. In villages surrounding Matasedona National Park, word spread quickly. An 8-year-old boy was missing in one of Africa's most dangerous landscapes. Time was critical, and the villagers understood this better than anyone. Gathering in large numbers, they pooled their collective knowledge of the wilderness. These were people deeply rooted in their environment, with generations of wisdom about the land's rhythms and dangers. Drumming soon became a central part of their search efforts. The resonating beats were not random. They carried specific cultural significance, intended to both comfort and guide. The villagers believed that the sound would reach Tinotenda, helping him orient himself and navigate back towards safety. The drumming echoed through the savannah, a relentless heartbeat of hope. As the searchers moved, they left markers, strips of fabric tied to trees, small piles of stones, to create visual cues that Tinotenda might recognize. But as hours turned into days, their optimism began to waver. The land was vast, and Tinotenda was just a child, facing dangers that would test even the most seasoned adults. Still, the community pressed on. Groups combed through dense thickets and open plains, their voices calling out his name. Women cooked meals to sustain the search parties, while elders offered prayers for his safe return. It wasn't just a search, it was a collective act of love and determination, driven by the belief that Tinotenda could not be lost forever. While the villagers searched tirelessly, the Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife Management Authority, ZimParks, mobilized its rangers. These men and women were seasoned trackers, their expertise honed by years of navigating Matasedona's perilous terrain. Armed with rifles for protection against predators and equipped with tracking tools, they approached the mission with grim determination. The rangers relied on clues, faint footprints in the dirt, broken branches, or impressions in the grass. Each sign told a story, but the trail was faint and easily lost. The region's unpredictable weather didn't help. Sudden rains would wash away tracks, while shifting winds scattered scents that their trained dogs could follow. Every step of the search was fraught with frustration. On the third day, a ranger spotted what appeared to be a footprint near a water source. It was small, perhaps belonging to a child. Excitement rippled through the team, but as they followed the trail, it disappeared into a rocky outcrop. The disappointment was crushing. Despite these setbacks, the rangers pressed on. They moved carefully through areas known to harbor lions and hyenas, scanning for signs of both Tinotenda and predators. Every evening, they regrouped to strategize, poring over maps and discussing the next steps. The stakes were impossibly high. Each day that passed meant Tinotenda was growing weaker. On the fifth day, hope had grown thin. The community's drumming continued, and the rangers pushed deeper into the wilderness. It was late in the afternoon when the breakthrough came. A ranger, scanning the edge of a dry riverbed, spotted movement, a small figure lying motionless beneath a tree. "Over here," he shouted, his voice slicing through the air. The team converged on the spot, hearts pounding. There, beneath the shade of the tree, was Tinotenda. His clothes were tattered, his skin sunburned and scratched, and his small frame looked alarmingly thin. But his chest rose and fell. He was alive. The scene that followed was overwhelming. Tears streamed down the faces of villagers and rangers alike as they carefully lifted Tinotenda into their arms. He was too weak to speak, but his eyes opened briefly, registering the faces around him. Dehydrated and exhausted, he was given water in small sips. His lips were cracked, his voice barely a whisper, but he managed to say one word, "Mama." The villagers erupted in cheers, their cries of relief echoing across the savannah. Tinotenda was carried back to the village, where his mother collapsed into sobs upon seeing him. The reunion was a mixture of joy and heartbreak, a testament to both the horrors he had endured and the miracle of his survival. The rescue was not just the result of expertise or determination, it was a testament to the power of community. The drumming that had echoed across the plains, the tireless efforts of the rangers, and the unwavering hope of Tinotenda's family all played a role in bringing him home. For Tinotenda's parents, the emotional journey of those 5 days was harrowing. From the moment he disappeared, their lives had been consumed by an unbearable combination of fear, guilt, and hope. His mother, Miriam, later described the period as an endless nightmare, filled with haunting images of what could have happened to her child in the unforgiving wilderness. When the rangers finally carried Tinotenda back into the village, the emotions overwhelmed her. Relief poured out in uncontrollable sobs as she embraced her son, clutching him tightly as if afraid he might slip away again. His father, Dambudzo, stood silently nearby, his stoic demeanor cracking as tears rolled down his face. For both parents, seeing Tinotenda alive was nothing short of a miracle. In the days that followed, the family wrestled with conflicting emotions. While they celebrated his survival, the trauma of his disappearance lingered. Miriam struggled to let Tinotenda out of her sight, even for a moment, while Dambudzo channeled his emotions into rebuilding a sense of normalcy for their family. Yet, every sound in the night, every rustle in the bushes, brought back the terror of those 5 days. At just 8 years old, Tinotenda had endured an experience few could fathom. When asked about his time in the wilderness, he spoke sparingly but vividly. He remembered the nights most clearly, the darkness pressing in around him, the sounds of lions roaring in the distance, and the cold that seemed to seep into his very bones. He described how he had relied on instincts he didn't know he possessed. He had climbed trees to escape the threat of predators and sought out small streams for water. Hunger gnawed at him constantly, but his focus remained on surviving each moment. "I kept thinking of my mama," he said quietly, "and how she would want me to come home." Tinotenda's courage and resourcefulness were remarkable, but his ordeal had left scars. He avoided talking about the moments when fear nearly consumed him, when he thought he wouldn't make it through another night. Yet, in his eyes, there was a quiet strength, a testament to his resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. Surviving such a harrowing ordeal at a young age can leave deep psychological imprints, and Tinotenda was no exception. Experts consulted by the family explained that while his survival demonstrated immense resilience, the trauma could manifest in unexpected ways over time. Nightmares were the most immediate concern. Tinotenda often woke up crying, his dreams filled with images of roaring lions and the unending darkness of the wilderness. He also showed signs of hypervigilance, flinching at sudden sounds or movements. These reactions, psychologists explained, were part of his mind's attempt to process the terror he had faced. The community played a crucial role in his recovery. Villagers surrounded Tinotenda with support, celebrating his return and sharing stories of his bravery. This communal embrace helped him feel safe again, reinforcing the bonds that had driven their tireless search for him. His parents, too, were instrumental in his healing. While they struggled with their own fears, they prioritized creating a sense of security for Tinotenda. They spent more time as a family, shared meals together, and told him stories to replace the frightening memories with comforting ones. While the long-term effects of his ordeal remained uncertain, one thing was clear. Tinotenda's survival was a testament not only to his courage but also to the strength of his family and community. With their unwavering support, he had a foundation for healing and moving forward. Tinotenda's survival defied conventional expectations, prompting a deeper examination from survival experts and psychologists. Dr. Evermore Gamba, a seasoned survival strategist, noted that Tinotenda's ability to remain calm and resourceful in a dangerous wilderness was extraordinary. The human instinct for survival is powerful, but what's remarkable is how he adapted to an environment he likely knew little about, Gamba stated. Psychologists offered insights into the mental resilience of children in high-stress situations. Dr. Chipo Muringa emphasized that Tinotenda's focus on staying alive could stem from a primal attachment to his family. A child's deep emotional bond with caregivers can act as a psychological anchor in moments of extreme adversity, she explained. Wildlife specialists were struck by Tinotenda's proximity to lions and elephants. Ranger Tatenda Cube theorized that elephants might have served as an unintentional barrier, keeping other predators at bay. In such ecosystems, even small shifts in predator dynamics can be life-saving, Cube remarked. The boy's story stands out among survival narratives because of his young age and the perilous environment he endured. Unlike other survival tales, his ordeal underscores the interplay between instinct and sheer determination, rather than reliance on learned survival skills. While parallels can be drawn to cases like Julian Coep's survival in the Amazon, Tino Tenda's experience is distinct in its cultural and ecological context. The presence of apex predators like lions and the intricate dynamics of African wilderness add layers of complexity, making his journey uniquely compelling. The drumming used by villagers, a technique rooted in their cultural heritage, was a pivotal factor in Tino Tenda's rescue. This tradition, passed down through generations, served as both a signal and a psychological comfort for the boy, bridging the gap between ancient knowledge and modern needs. The search effort also reflected the symbiosis of traditional practices and professional expertise. Rangers used cutting-edge tracking tools, while locals relied on intimate knowledge of the terrain. This collaboration underscored the importance of integrating indigenous wisdom with modern strategies in crisis situations. Tino Tenda's ordeal also raised questions about human-wildlife coexistence in protected areas. His story shed light on the challenges faced by communities living near game parks, where everyday life can intersect with the untamed forces of nature. At its core, Tino Tenda's story is a testament to human resilience and the power of community. It reminds us of the innate strength that emerges in moments of crisis and the profound impact of collective action. The boy's survival against overwhelming odds reflects the delicate balance between vulnerability and courage, a theme that resonates universally. His miraculous rescue has become more than just a tale of survival. It's a rallying point for discussions about child safety, wilderness education, and conservation. His experience brought attention to the risks faced by those living near wildlife reserves, sparking calls for better safety measures and coexistence strategies. The story also highlighted the invaluable role of community support and traditional knowledge in solving modern challenges, inspiring hope for similar efforts in the future. As Tino Tenda's story echoes across the world, it leaves us with a profound question. What does his survival reveal about the untapped strength we all carry within? If Tino Tenda's incredible journey inspired you, join us by subscribing to True Crime Daily Stories. Don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your voice.